All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming. Welcome to the new Breeze offices. Woo! Just a few introductions. My name is Brad Kanouse. I'm the Director of Investor Services with Breeze Real Estate now. And I'm hosting Investor League with Matt Cochran, CEO, founder of Fountain Mortgage, president, concierge of Fountain Mortgage.
Oh boy, so, all the jobs.
Yep.
All the jobs.
And I'm very excited actually to have Jana Jeffery with us tonight. She has flipped multiple properties. Mm-hmm. I think you've been investing quite a long time.
Years,
we'll learn. So she's a real estate broker, software developer, and strategic investor with nearly 10 years of experience, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. She really enjoys flipping craftsman properties built between 1880 and 1925. Mm-hmm. So no burnout properties, no cookie cutter rehabs. So she has quite a few systems that we'll sort of talk about tonight. Mm-hmm. As I've been getting to know her more as an agent on our team, you have quite a few partnerships mm-hmm. and pretty clear vision on where you want to go. So she has non-traditional approach to funding. Mm-hmm. So we'll learn a little bit about that now. And you've done 10 flips? Over 10 flips?
Eight. Eight of my own. And then I've done probably 6 or 7 for clients. Okay.
And you said your average net is you're around 86,000.
Yeah. Well, 100 usually.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So everybody welcome Jana Jeffery. Okay.
Oh yeah,
there we go.
The wine there.
So I had to get that one photo in there. So first of all, just tell us exactly what led you to doing flips, like over buy and holds and things like that, and then also a little bit about why you choose to do 1880 to 1925 houses. What about those? Yeah,
so I actually obviously I was a real estate agent before I started investing myself. And so I was coming across a lot of properties where my sellers wanted me to do some rehab work for them or wanted my ideas on rehabs and whatnot. And so I ended up starting out by just rehabbing their properties for them. So I would put up the cash to do the rehab. They would sign an IOU at closing. It was a whole process. It's not that willy-nilly, trust me. But and then I would rehab their properties. And what I found in doing that was that I really, really loved the design and the flow and function aspect of creating new spaces. And I really, really also love old homes, really old homes. Bringing back the charm and character and trying to, uncover the things that people have plastered over or drywalled over or, all those fun things that you discover along the way. And that's really what got me started on the 1880 to 1925. That's my sweet spot. Those are the houses that I really love because there's so much history and so much to uncover in them. They've usually been rehabbed 2 to 3 times before, usually relatively not great. And things have been kind of covered up or not taken care of that should have been addressed early on. And I like coming in and doing that. And then I also kind of have an interior design aspect of it too, where none of my rehabs look like the traditional roll-out vinyl gray flooring with the plastered gray walls and all of that. My rehabs tend to have a little bit more intrigue and interest in them, and they sell faster, I think, because of that also. Okay. The funny thing about it is my kids and my husband have gotten into it as well, and so they've really enjoyed getting into the older homes because there's so many things stuffed in the walls. There really is. We found old liquor bottles from like the late 1800s, which is really cool. We found Nazi paraphernalia, like magazine art, or not newspaper print, things like that. We found all kinds of just really interesting stuff. And so my kids and my husband love to go research all of those too and kind of, build a story around the people that have lived there. And we go back and look at the Sanborn maps. We want to see all of the things along the way that, that have happened with this property. So it tends to create a much deeper story when we go to turn it over to the new homeowner.
Nice. So, okay. Yeah. So we're going to talk about one specific flip that you've done. So this one's 300 East 1st Street in Lee Summit. It is an 1890 Queen Anne house. So out of all your flips, was this your first one, or where was this along the lines?
So this was my 5th flip, but my second old home flip. My first one was in downtown Independence, and I had a blast doing that one actually. And so when I started looking around at other opportunities, this really fit my sort of profile, the thing that I really enjoyed. Okay. So yeah, we converted this one from a 3-bed, 1.5 bath to a 3-bed, 2-bath. And it's a little over 1,600 square feet.
Okay. Was there a specific factor that led you to that specific home, like the location? Like, tell us a little bit about what factors led you specifically to this house.
So the funny thing about this particular house was the homeowners had bought it in 2008, and they'd bought it for, I think it was like $86,000 in 2008, and they bought it rehabbed. But the people that owned it also used to work for me in my former career. So the husband was one of my team members. And so he reached out to me and was like, I saw that you did this property in Independence. We have a really old house. We don't want to go through the process of putting it on the market. We're actually kind of embarrassed by the state of things, and we don't really want to deal with any of that. Would you buy it from us? And I was like, I'm going to need to see it. So I went over and we walked through the house a couple of times, and it definitely, they had let things go, like really badly. And to the point where once we actually dug into the house, there were live and dead animals in the walls, in the ceilings. And yeah, it was rough, real rough. But
So you're about to buy one, man.
I don't think there's any dead animals in that one. Maybe some live ones. But no, so this particular house, they were like, we need to get out of it. We need to buy something smaller. His wife had started to have some health challenges and needed to get out of a 2-story situation. So they asked me if I would buy this house from them. And I was a little like, this is a little bit bigger of a project than I've taken on previously, but I'm down for it. Give me some time. So they also needed to buy. And so this was probably one of the big things for me, was they wanted to buy another home. They didn't really have a ton of equity. They had some, obviously. It was 2021 when I bought this. So they had some equity in it, but given the condition, they didn't have a ton. I could have gotten it for 85 to 90K. I offered them 115 because I knew that they needed to buy, and I knew what my upside was going to look like. So I wasn't particularly looking for a Lease Summit property, but I bought it thinking I can use it as an Airbnb until I learned the rules in Lease Summit about Airbnbs. And then I was like, well, shit, I've got enough money in here, enough room to play. I'll just flip it. So.
Yeah. Okay. So talk a little bit about, you said you bought it for 115. Mm-hmm. You put 10% down on the property?
I did.
Okay.
Yep. So I used commercial.
Okay.
A commercial loan on this one in particular. I have a commercial lending arm that I broker for now, but it was a 10% down conventional commercial loan, and 100% of the rehab is funded as part of that as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you budgeted, I have notes here, you said you budgeted $78K
Yes.
for it,
Yep.
and your actual rehab cost was $76K.
Yep.
So you came in under.
I did.
Good for you. All right.
Yeah. I overestimated.
And 9 months.
Yeah.
That's a long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with the timing on it, I put the house under contract in June or July of 2021. It took us a little while to find them something that they were really ready to buy, and I don't like doing big interior rehabs in the summer. I want to save those for the winter. So it kind of worked out for us to kind of push it to closing in November. We closed in November of 21, and then my brother, who was severely disabled and I was his caretaker, passed away like 3 weeks later. So I took out all of my frustration and grief on the interior demo of this house over the course of about 3.5 months. So it took a little bit longer than it normally would have, but I was invested at that point. I was like, this house is gonna get all of it.
Yeah, nice, okay. And you said, this is the number that amazed me when we were talking. So time to rehab 9 months, and your holding costs were $6,500,
Yes.
which is because of your loan and your lending.
So it's interest-only loan, so
yeah.
we weren't paying any principal or interest. It's an 18-month loan. So, I mean, it was actually pretty cheap. And our utilities, until the contractors started doing some weird stuff, which we'll talk about, were great. And then we had a weird spike, and we had to have a conversation.
Yeah. So all in all, you were in it for $20K.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
So
20K
nice.
of my own cash.
Okay. And you said you listed at $350. Sold it in 2 days for $360.
Yep.
So total net profit $166.
Yep.
$650.
Yep.
Good for you. Congrats. So tell us a little bit about the rehab. Do you want me to show the video now?
Yeah.
So we got a little video that she made. Let me see if I can get this. If it'll pop up there. Maybe not. Hold on.
This is what's most important.
I may have to
Share that.
share. You want to talk a little bit about the rehab while I get this going there?
Yeah, so this house was a weird floor plan. So like I mentioned, it had been a Queen Anne with it wasn't a very deep house. It had been added on to, like they turned the back porch at one point, probably in the 30s or 40s based on some of the other stuff I saw going on in there. They turned the back porch into the kitchen, and then they added another back porch onto it. So it was like a hodgepodge situation, and the roofing was definitely very, very strange.
There we go. I got it.
There were 2 cisterns on the property, very deep cisterns that we didn't know were there. Those are like really deep wells, and so they used to have more than one, and so they would pump water from one into the other, and it would get cleaned in the process and then pumped it into the house. This is really, really old. But they were very, very, very deep, to the point where one of them we couldn't even fill. Like, we would drop the rock into the cistern and it would take forever, and then you'd hear dink. I'm like, oh shit. And the contractors were shoving all kinds of stuff in there, trying to fill it in.
You ready for me to play this?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's
And it's
see.
not this car.
Hold on.
This
This isn't it. This is a YouTube commercial.
and cash flow. And the more cash flow you get, the more peace you want to have.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah, that was definitely don't play that one. Here it goes. No.
There we go. There you go.
It's good times. We were having fun. But yeah,
Go ahead.
I was just going to mention on this really quickly. So this picture right here, and I've got an album of this too. We had to rebuild the entire second floor. The previous master bathroom on the second floor had been redone to the point where they had so much tile without the appropriate supports that it did start to bow into the living room below. And so the plumbing, the cast iron plumbing had busted. Like, there was just a lot going on there. So we ended up having to take out the entire second floor on this half of the house and rebuild it, thankfully with our specs. So we got the plumbing in the right place, the electrical in the right place, all that stuff. But that was an unexpected expense that cost me from being able to do the back porch setup that I really wanted to do.
Okay. I mean, you've talked a little bit about the rehab. Was there anything specific? I mean, obviously the floor. Anything unique? I mean, I know there's some things, we've talked about things behind the wall. You want to talk a little bit about the findings and things like that that you've...
Yeah, so we had, in the living room, so in the living room area, there was this kind of like weird separation. It didn't make a lot of sense, and I thought there's probably a beam underneath holding up this section of the house. So it took 3.5 months of pulling all the drywall out just to figure out what was really there and like what was structurally sound and what wasn't. And come to find out, the kitchen, like I mentioned, was a back porch at one point. So it did not have the supports underneath it to support all of the cabinetry, the tile, the appliances. It really didn't. And so underneath the house in the basement, you could see it just was starting to, so the whole center of the house was like starting to do this. Because the rehabs that had been done before weren't really looking at structure when they were putting in, 80 pounds of tile, and things like that. We also discovered in the walls the Nazi paraphernalia I mentioned. So they were actually newspaper articles from that era of, in Kansas City, of salutes, and it was creepy. We found dead birds. We found a live old possum and its dead family. We actually, my husband, there's another video up there. You hear I think he was 15 at the time, screaming cuss words when this possum fell out of the ceiling as we're taking down the drywall and the insulation. And I screamed like a little girl. It was hilarious. Everybody had fun with that. But I mean, that's the cool part about it is you find a lot of interesting things. The scary part about it is you find a lot of interesting things. And definitely seeing like what people had done in the past, like plumbing being on the outside of the, in the bathroom on the outside walls with very little insulation. And they kept talking about how they, the pipes were always freezing in their kitchen. They were always freezing in the master bathroom. I'm like, well, there's no insulation and the plumbing is on the outside wall. So that makes perfect sense. We can add some more, change that or whatever. But the house had good exterior bones. Like the structure was there. So once we pulled off all the siding and saw all the rotting going almost all the way through, we ended up having to replace a lot of studs. So you're like, well, how the hell did you manage to get 76K out of all of this stuff? This was not my original vision. My original vision was bigger. Finding all of these things meant we had to pivot really quickly. And I'm not just because I'm an agent and I knew I would have to disclose, it's important to me that when I pass off a home to the new homeowner that they can trust it because my name is attached to that and I know that could come back to me. I want to make sure we're doing it right. So when we dug into a lot of this stuff, it was like, well, okay, there goes the back, pergola that we were going to build. Okay, well, there goes the, upgraded dual HVAC we were going to put in so that, there's so many skylights and vaulted ceilings upstairs. It really could have used it. But there goes that. We're going to fill in 2 cisterns. We're going to replace an entire second floor. We're going to do all these other things that have to be done. And then on top of it, we had a new contractor that we were working with, but I don't know, you want me to keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
We had a new contractor that we were working with. It was a professionally licensed contracting company, fairly reputable, very highly recommended, who was subbing out a lot of stuff. And, despite having very clear scopes of work and progress payments and all of those things, they were creating a lot of hazards inside the house. So I always visit my rehabs, usually every day. Sometimes it's every other day, but I'm always there. And so like walking through the house, I'm tripping over nails and screws sticking up out of boards in the middle of the walkway and, tons of cords and things like that. That became a really big issue for us. But it turns out that the reason there was so much crap inside the house that wasn't supposed to be there was because they had started their cabinet making side hustle in my garage, my detached garage. That I did very quickly, it was like 3 days in, I think. And there was a padlock on our detached garage, and I'm like, I'm bringing over material for you, and I don't have anywhere to store it. And he's like, oh, well, we'll be back later. We'll get you a key for the padlock. Great. 2 or 3 days goes by, still don't have don't have this key. I've got this material in my truck. I'm like, I need to drop this stuff off. I finally went over in the evening when I normally wouldn't. Like I've said, I visited almost every day, every other day. I went over when I normally wouldn't have to find like 12 people in there making cabinets with extension cords running out of the house. Literally almost like every outlet had an extension cord in it, and they were doing stuff out in the garage. So we ended our relationship at that point. We were probably 3 weeks in. And there was a lot of, it helps to have an attorney on your side too when you're going through some of this stuff, because we'd made progress payments a little bit ahead of where we were at the time. And it ended up costing us probably about $8,000 total in lawyer's fees to get out of that. But it ended up being a really, really great house. And the people that bought it are not taking care of it. When you drive by it, the yard looks terrible, but they've at least maintained the porch, which I was pretty passionate about.
From this flip, what do you feel like was your biggest takeaway?
I do a room by room scope, a project scope with photos of material. So I pre-pick everything for the house generally ahead of time. So I know roughly what my costs are going to be. When we were having to pivot, I wasn't making those updates and I'd already bought material. So having a good catalog of the material that we had already had on hand would have been, I think, more helpful and would have saved me some money in the long run, running it back and forth and trying to return it. I think too, really big thing is getting a floor plan designed. Like even if you do it yourself in Canva, it doesn't matter. Just having an idea of what you want to do. Like when we had to rebuild the second floor, we had to run all new plumbing and electrical, and it changed how we were going to set up the master bathroom. We ended up having to create a sitting area. So, we had to do a bunch of changes, and having updated that floor plan helped the contractors out a lot. And so that ended up being something I've always added to my list to do now, for sure. And then we always overestimate. So we overestimate about 15% on every project, and double the time. So we're never disappointed when it ends up taking that long.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about what is today, what does your investment portfolio look like?
Yeah, so today we've got 2 rental properties currently, and are on the lookout for our next flip. We divested quite a bit during the COVID boom because it made sense to do it then, and then we held on to that cash and we've just invested it in other, our other properties and other things to do some upgrades. But we had 2 short-term rentals in Stockton Lake that we had for a few years. We just sold those about 2 years ago as well. So right now we just have 2 rentals. But our goal is to add some more.
I was going to say, so 10-year goal.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you could, in 10 years from now, what is your
So this is why I did not want to talk about the tax implications of what I'm doing. No, I'm going to be paying the IRS. No. One of the big things for me is development projects. And so I've got a couple of really great relationships with some overseas developers right now. And so we're actually putting some money into those investments right now. So one of the books I was going to recommend is Nomad Capitalist. It teaches you how to legally move money around so that you can do some of these other investments. And I can share that if you want to send that out. But our goal is to go more on the development end of things and actually build communities, both internationally, but then here as well. So we're currently on the lookout, if anybody knows of anything, for a mobile home park that we were going to turn into a luxury tiny home short-term rental project. So that's
nice.
Today? Okay, I haven't seen it.
Yesterday I saw something about a mobile home park.
I'll have to check that.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Nice. So you named Nomad Capitalist. What other, for investors out there, books or podcasts that you would recommend that have helped you in your investment journey?
So I don't like the podcast aspect of it, but, and I know this is going to sound silly, but the turning point for me in how I thought about investing was listening to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I know everybody talks about that book, but when listening to it was a lot different for me than like reading it. Listening to the different stories, and he would elaborate a lot more on the audiobook than he did in the book itself. But that helped me kind of change my perception of how I was looking at my investments and recognizing that I'm investing in my own learning and in myself for the future. And so, yeah, I'm probably going to take some hits early on. Not everything is going to be profitable right out of the gate, but I'm learning a lot in doing that too. And so just hearing that and kind of walking through that really helped me sort of reposition how I thought about my investment journey. And I took more risks as a result of it, and they paid off, but I definitely was putting myself out there a lot more then. So I would definitely suggest listening to it on Audible. It's very good.
Nice. And then any advice that you would give to investors that are maybe just starting out, or you talked about the learning experience there, but through your experiences over the years?
Yeah, I think I said earlier, having a good solid project plan that's room by room. I've worked with clients that have been a little bit more loosey-goosey on their rehab, especially on their flip projects, not having a good solid idea of what they wanted to do at the outset, and then they end up floundering for a long time. And so that is one thing, room by room, an actual scope with material and what you want to do helps you communicate to contractors, but then also helps you stay on track with what you're trying to accomplish too. Second thing is, and it's the super boring part of it, but managing your expenses, like you keep track of literally everything, because the minute you start to see the tipping point and where your expenses are kind of cresting over where you thought you would be at that stage, you run into a little bit of scope creep. You start thinking, oh, it's only 30 extra cents a tile. It looks better, it looks nicer. You have to then start to become that person that's like, no, I'm not gonna spend that money to do that because it doesn't make sense at this stage. But I would say having that room by room scope helps keep you on track with those expenses. So if I know that I'm spending a lot of money in the living room and I haven't even gotten to the kitchen yet, like I'm gonna stop on the living room, we're moving to the kitchen, because I need to make sure the funding is there. That's the thing that's gonna sell it. The master bedroom, bathroom, and the kitchen are gonna be the two things that sell it. And then I would say too, like making sure that you've got a good attorney that you trust, because there are always gonna be situations where you're like, I need to know whether I'm overstepping on this, I have a contract with this person or these people or whatever it is, and I need to know like what my rights are at this stage. So I've found, and I've got a couple referrals for you if you're looking for one, that are real estate specific, that have experience in contract negotiations as well as like seller financing, and doing some of those things too is really, really important. And then I would say avoid taking on partners unless you know them really, really well and are possibly married to them.
Nice.
Just saying. That's an expensive lesson. You're married to them, your shit's their shit.
Yeah.
It's gonna work out that way.
So before we open it up to the audience, is there anything else you want to sort of touch base on this property specific that we didn't need, or anything else?
I was gonna. No, I think that's probably it for now. I'll just take questions.
Take questions. Anybody have any questions for Jana?
Yeah.
There you go, Duke.
On that home, what's the percentage that you did work and what you hired out?
Yeah.
Excellent
And then
question.
how much do you tend to throw in for budget on landscaping?
Great question. But two great questions. So I always do the demo. And the reason I always do my own demo is because I want to see what's behind the walls before someone else touches it. And I might want to save something someone else thinks is garbage, right? Like, built-ins, things like I want to save those things. So I always do the demo on all of my jobs. Beyond that, I don't do electrical, I don't do plumbing. I will paint. Usually I'm doing a lot of the finish painting, touching up and things like, because it's just that way. I want it to look right. So I tend to do a little bit work on the finish side, and then we stage all of our rehabs, so it's a mix between myself and the stager that we hire at the time. So it tends to be a little bit of a joint thing. Second question was around landscaping.
Landscaping, yeah.
So depending on the size, I will always plan on aggressive front beds. And so I typically will spend about $1,000 to $1,200 on landscaping in the front. Then depending on what I'm doing in the back, I try not to put down sod. We did on this one because we were at the stage where we just had to. There was no way we were gonna get any grass out of that thing right away. So we ended up putting sod on this one, and that added about $600 to the budget that I took out of something else. But in the backyard, I usually will only spend on just grass seed, and trying to do that fairly early in the so like I said, I do most of my rehabs in the wintertime. So especially if they're big interior rehabs, I'll do most of that in the winter. So when it hits springtime is when I'm usually going on market, and I know things will grow, right? And they'll look right at that point in the season. So I will usually spend a little bit of money on flowers and shrubs and grass seed, but $1,000 to $1,500 is about my max usually.
Okay. You know, like,
With rehabbing old homes like that, are you always, do you do testing for like asbestos, or like assume that every house has asbestos, or how do you handle that?
I can usually tell at this point if it's got, if something has it, like the tiles and things like that. So I don't assume necessarily that there's asbestos, but if there is, I don't touch it. We go over it. I don't want, that's a whole other expense that I'm not really interested. So we'll preserve it and go over it if we can. I think on this one did not have asbestos siding. It was cedar siding on this one. So I've only had one that had asbestos siding on it, and that was actually recommended by them due to our proximity to an elementary school and 2 daycares. Despite them being able to tent to take it all off, they just didn't want to. So we went ahead and just went over on that one. But we do sewer line testing. We inspect for, everything gets a new coat of paint. All electrical is tested. All plumbing is tested, always.
when you go through properties, what is when looking and buying? Do you have an inspector that you bring with you? Do you bring your contractor with you when you go through it? What is your process when first going to the property?
I always assume that there's something wrong with the sewer line, especially on these old houses in established neighborhoods. So I'm always estimating that that's going to be an issue. And I will when I'm buying, but I don't rescope after.
Yeah.
We talked about this before.
Yeah.
But I do bring my primary contractor that I use for finish work with me, because I want them to see the vision and also understand kind of where I'm headed with it, so they can give me better finish pricing. And then I do have an inspector that I work with quite a bit, but I usually end up paying double, because I want them to spend about double the time that they would normally spend just really digging into everything and making sure. But I buy everything as is. Like, my expectation is that they're not going to do shit. They're not going to fix anything, and I'm not renegotiating. I'm not playing that game. I want the house and I want it done. So I don't spend a lot of time on the front end trying to haggle. I'm giving you a fair price, and that's what I want out of it.
Nice. Yeah.
So when you say you go by room, are you estimating costs by yourself, or is the contractor doing it?
Contractor that I've used on multiple rehabs, that kind of knows my level of finish requirement. We've gotten there over time, but it's a joint effort. I usually can budget material fine. He comes in and budgets the labor aspect of it for me, and then we talk about what's going to be subbed out and what he can handle himself, and his crew, his in-house crew. Yeah. Definitely having a good solid contractor that you trust and that knows like the style of work that you want to do and the level of finish. So the gentleman that I work with primarily, he's actually gone with me to look at finished homes. And so we'll talk about, like, I like bullnose corners. I like soft close cabinets. I want, eggshell paint. I don't want semi-gloss for anything lower than, hip length or lower. Everything I do gets crown molding. Everything I do gets some level of trim, quarter round, usually on the bottom. So he knows, like, he's gone around with me and so knows what my preferences are. So when I'm asking him for an estimate, he knows the level that I'm expecting. And of course he pads too. I know we talk about it. I'm like, I'm leaving you room in here. It's a joint effort though. I did this particular house, we brought in a contractor that I hadn't worked with before that was very highly recommended, and they were just, like, they had plumbing leaks and they were leaving them in the walls that way, and I would come over and I'm seeing, water in the ceiling, and they ended up fixing it like 4 times and they weren't getting it right. I told them to stop, and I was like, I know you're busy on this other job, but I really need you to come address this, because it's the 4th time we're doing this and it's not getting done. Same company, I like, I forget the pattern, the hex style, the herringbone, thank you,
Herringbone, yeah.
Good Lord. I like herringbone patterns for my tile and my showers, and they would only do 1/3 stacked. And I was like, I don't want 1/3 stacked. You've done it twice now, and now you're removing it, and that's your expense, not mine, because I told you exactly what I wanted. So it helps to have somebody along for the ride with you that has that level of vision, that can see what you're trying to accomplish, and that knows you're also going to pay for. You're going to take care of them in that process, and this isn't the only job, but that you trust what they're doing too. And I think that was, honestly, that was a really big thing for me, was getting to that point where I had someone I could trust like that.
And I think that's a good thing to note, that this is the way I want it. And if they didn't do it that way, you spoke up and made them fix it. I mean, that's a big thing where I know a lot of investors that I have worked with, they're like, I'm just going to let my contractor make the choices. And I'm like, what? And it may not come out to look like the comps that we have supplied and things like that. So,
well, and I'm definitely like, I know what I want, but at the end of the day, it's also a partnership, right? Correct. So I'm like, hey, this is what I think I want to see here. If you have a better idea or a way that you think is going to work better and might still accomplish what I'm trying to do, I want that level of back and forth. Like I don't want somebody just doing exactly what I've told them to do. I'm going to tell you how I would like it, but I want that to be a partnership. And so that's definitely a very big thing for me, is I won't hire contractors who won't give ideas.
Yeah.
Like
good.
Suggestions.
Yeah.
Have you revamped your finishes based on feedback from buyers and things like that?
Yeah, I have. I used to estimate, showers are being a big one. I used to estimate just a regular surround that, you buy at a home, just a stock surround. And then I found that I could pull more money if I spent a little bit of extra cash on doing subway tile in that herringbone pattern instead. And maybe it doesn't go all the way to the ceiling like it did in this house. That's a lot of weight on the wall, so it's a longer process to build it up because there's so much weight. But it ends up, people walk into that shower and they're like, holy shit, this is amazing. And when you do spend time doing those little extra things like that, people will spend a lot more time looking at how awesome it is and not about, something, the cabinet is busted over here that you're going to have to fix in a week. And, somebody chipped a door on the way out and the hinge isn't on the door correctly. And I've had one where the door was upside down and no one noticed it. And I'm like, okay, you had to re-drill holes in order to make that happen. I'm just not seeing the logic. But when you spend that time, when you spend that little extra time on sort of those flashier things, like for a long time, we're only doing butcher block countertops because that's what people wanted. I think it's the stupidest thing. I don't want to buy a house with butcher block countertops. I would never have them in my own home because they just don't stand up over time. But people love to see them when they're buying.
Yeah.
Okay, it's cheaper for me. I know. I'm like, that's $380 per 8 by 3 slab versus all of the granite. Sure, fine.
Yeah.
Fine. If it sells it.
Pan on one of those butcher blocks, and then see how much you love it. And then black.
I'm serious. I'm like. And you can epoxy them. Like we've tried all kinds of things to try to make it durable over time. Just no. But people like to see them. They buy houses for them.
Alex, you had a question?
How do you find your deals?
That's a great question. So out of all of the ones that I've done, they've either come from other people, so they're referrals from my network, or I've bought 3 on market. On MLS, but I have a very specific criteria. Those suckers have been sitting for a hot minute, or I've seen some other things happening in the court system simultaneously, so I dig into those to make sure they're going to be a good fit for me, but most of them are just networking. They just really are.
Do you have like a margin requirement that you're shooting for, and is it based on what you put into it from a cash on cash return? Is it based on like a percentage of what you sell the house for?
Excellent question. So my only requirement is that I have to make at least what I'm willing to spend on a rehab budget in net profit. So my calculators are all set up that if I put in an $80K budget for a rehab, I need to make $80K net on the backside, which means I'm very conservative, right? And so I end up leaving myself plenty of room for the oh shit moments and the learning lessons, you know, along the way. But that's my only real requirement, is that I can get out of it within 12 months, generally is my goal. Get out of it within 12 months, and I need to make at least what I'm willing to spend on the rehab back on my net.
Do you go in, because you mentioned this one, you were going to Airbnb it, right? Do you go in with, I mean, I would assume
I usually go in with the plan that I'm going to flip it. Yeah. You know?
But do you then run numbers to say, if my flip doesn't come out, like this is my buy and hold numbers, and it'll work as a buy and hold as well?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm always, you know, sometimes the projects are just going to be straight flips. Like there's not enough room in it to sit on it for a while, or whatever the case may be, or you have to do so much to it, it just wouldn't make sense to hold on to it. But I at least need to have two avenues. So it's either going to be a short-term rental if it's not going to work out, or it's going to be something I hold on to and try to sell or finance to someone else, generally on the backside. Yeah, so at least more than one strategy.
Do you run everything through an LLC, or is it?
I do, yes. Yeah, so the commercial lending arm that I work with, it's required to be in an LLC. They want that level of liability anyway. I frankly would never personally buy anything.
Is that hard?
It's commercial loan, so it seems like hard money, but it's not the same criteria. So there's no appraisal requirement for the commercial loan itself, because they know you're building in the ARV, but they also want to see a rehab budget. And it is draw based. Yeah. And so I structure my draws in a way where I front load my draws, so that I mentioned I do all my own demo. So I'm front loading a lot of the budget for my first and second phase on that first draw. When the rehab budget gets sent to the lender, that I have my budget that is legitimate on first phase, second phase, third phase, but I always front load them so that the draw is always paying for the next phase. And so I don't, just kind of structured it that way.
You mentioned rentals. How do you like the rentals?
I don't love them, actually.
Where are they? How many?
I was about to say, he's about to buy them from you if you want them.
Well, one's in Boise, Idaho. That's
okay.
actually where yeah, it's in Boise. It's a very hot market still for some strange reason. Yeah, and then I do have one out at the lake, out at Stockton Lake still. Yeah, I mean,
What you like about it? Maybe too far away.
I should have bought them differently to plan for having someone else manage them. I just don't want to deal with it. And so because we did not plan appropriately, we actually, with the one in Boise, we ended up refinancing it so that we did have enough room to be able to do all of that. And now we have a property management company for that one, but we're still managing the one out in Stockton, and I'm ready for that to be done. So. But yeah, I don't want to manage my own properties. I want someone else to do that. It's too much of a headache, and I just don't want to spend my time managing those headaches.
All right.
Anything else?
Any other questions for Jana? Cool.
Well, thanks for
Yeah.
letting me.
Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Jana. All right. Our next, we're gonna skip June just because. So, but we'll come back July 10th. We'll send out an invite, and we'll figure out whether it's actually at Fountain Mortgage or if it's back here. So it's already booked. There you go. Yeah. So thank you everybody for coming. Feel free to hang out for some more time, grab another drink, get some food, hit Jen up if you guys got more questions. So yeah.
Thank you. No, appreciate your time. Yeah.